kids in any society.
I never said that I thought it would be bad.
Are you high now?
Yeah.
Hello, Tom Tilley here with you for The Hack, and welcome to our latest segment, Home and Away, Representations of Migrant Experiences. I feel like a text representation of a character's experience with migration through textual form allows us as an audience to understand the importance of each environment for the individual. Today we'll be discussing Toyblin's novel Brooklyn and Atwood's metaphysical poem Journey to the Interior. These texts both represent the enduring connection of the protagonist to their familiar environments despite an alteration in circumstances. In Brooklyn, the protagonist Eilish experiences a literal migration as she moves from Enniscorthy to Brooklyn. This migration is conveyed through symmetrical novel construction and a unique narrative persona. By contrast, Journey to the Interior is written from the perspective of Susanna Moodie, who immigrated to Canada. Through continual references to the physical terrain of the Canadian environment, Atwood connects us with the protagonist's psychological exploration of the self. Brooklyn is broken up into 4 parts, with each being representative of Eilish's evolving experience with migration. In Part 1, the importance of Enniscorthy to Eilish is established through its impact on her personality. Enniscorthy's insular values are demonstrated in Eilish as she lacks ambition. This is evident through anaphora, as she thought she would always have the same net friends and neighbours, the same routines and the same streets. After her migration to Brooklyn, Eilish's relationship with Enniscorthy causes her to harbour hostility towards Brooklyn, which all seemed like nothing compared to the picture she had of home, of her own room, the food she had eaten, the clothes she had worn. The omission of specific detail in this cumulative list leads us to substitute our experiences with the landscape that Eilish is describing, adding to the universality of the experience, thus depicting the way a remembered landscape can impact an individual's experience with migration. Similarly, in Journey to the Interior, Atwood uses the physical migration of the protagonist as an analogy to explore the difficulties associated with emotional migration. Moodie, like Eilish, is fictitiously stuck in a new environment and lacks an authentic connection to this land. The reflective tone of the poem establishes its setting as the protagonist looks retrospectively on her migratory experiences. Familiar attributes of Susanna's new interior landscape are demonstrated through simile as she says, "The hills become as endless as prairies," suggesting the protagonist's desire to develop a relationship with this new environment. However, the adversities Susanna experiences with migration are represented through the metaphor, surrounded by a tangle of branches, a net of air. This kinesthetic imagery suggests the constriction felt by the persona as the new aspects she discovered of herself conflict with what she previously knew. Indeed, the representation of migrant experiences in the poem demonstrates the impact of particular landscapes on an individual's experience with new ones. Comparably, in Brooklyn, Eilish's resistance to staying in Brooklyn is clear when she says Tony saying that he loved her made her feel like she would have to accept that this was the only life she was going to have. This use of the adjective only emphasises the reluctance of Eilish to stay in Brooklyn. However, Eilish begins to assimilate into Brooklyn. This can be seen as she was seeing Tony 3 nights a week, and because of her lectures she had time for nothing else. This suggests her infatuation with Tony, who acts as a metaphor for Brooklyn. However, when Eilish returns to Enniscorthy, the development of her relationship with Jim Farrell is emblematic of an enduring connection to Enniscorthy, one that overshadows any connection she had established to Brooklyn. This is clear as Tony seems like part of a dream from which she had awoken with considerable force. The metaphor demonstrates Eilish's regression into her Enniscorthian self, suggesting that her positive experiences of migration have been overshadowed by Toyblin's representation of an enduring connection to Enniscorthy. Thus, the connection of an individual to habitual landscapes influences their experiences with migration. Likewise, Atwood demonstrates difficulties faced by Susanna in coming to terms with her newfound emotional environment through the use of an aside, "Have I been walking in circles again?" This rhetorical question, along with the fragmented structure of the poem's conclusion, suggests the confusion that has been created as a result of Susanna's shifting emotional landscape. The closing sentences of the poem, in its use of personal pronouns, "I know it's easier for me to lose my way forever here than in other landscapes," suggests the impact of this psychological migration on the protagonist. Additionally, it solidifies the negative experience of the individual throughout this migration. Therefore, both texts show the impact of the character's nostalgic landscape on their experiences of migration. Well, folks, that's just about all we have time for tonight. I'm sure it's very clear from our discussion that both Brooklyn and Journey to the Interior explore the impact of remembered landscapes on individuals' migratory experiences. If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to subscribe. Thank you.